Hey guys, and welcome back to the New Vision podcast. This is episode number 2. I'm your host Nick Weiser, and today we're joined by special guest Jed Brophy. So Jed's an actor based out of New Zealand. You can find his newest movie Blue Moon down in the description below. There'll be links. And today we're going to be talking about mainly how Jed became an actor, how he turned his found passion for acting into a career, and so thanks for coming on the show, Jed.
It's my pleasure, Nick.
So first off, we're going to get into the other stuff in a bit, but I just wanted to talk about Blue Moon for a little bit.
Yeah.
So basically, could you give a rundown of what Blue Moon's about and sort of maybe the process you had filming it?
Sure. I'd been working with an actor called Mark Hadlow, who's a friend of mine, and a friend of his called Steph Harris, who's a policeman but also a writer. He's made 6 films altogether. And we'd been working on another film which had been in funding rounds with the Film Commission, and it had kind of stalled. And Mark Hadlow said to him offhandedly, we should just make a film, we should just write a film that we can make on an iPhone. And Steph went away and thought about this, and in the meantime he was stopped at a BP service station at about 3:34 in the morning and just noticed the kind of people that go through there, and he kind of wondered what it would be like, what the kind of people, what their conversations would be like, what their rationale would be like, what their jobs would be like. Were they dodgy? As a policeman, you know, you kind of have those slightly different views of people. And so he went away and wrote it in about 11 days and sent me and Mark the script. We loved it. And in December of 2017, we went down and shot 4 scenes on a phone just to have a look at how it would look and to see what kind of length of takes we could do, because Mark and I had the idea of trying to rehearse it like a play so we could try and shoot the whole thing kind of like one shot, like do as few takes of scenes as we could. And then in March, he'd got some money from the Tasman District Council and put together a crew of some highly experienced people and also some people that had never been on a film before. And we'd got a Moondog anamorphic lens and an iPhone 7 Ultra with a handheld gimbal and the Filmic Pro app that goes on the phone. And Mark and I had had time, 3 months to develop our characters with each other. We'd had a few rehearsals, we'd had a few meetings, we'd talked about how we'd like to play the characters and sent emails backwards and forwards to Steph. And then we went down there, we put up in a house, all the cast stayed in a house, and from 11 o'clock at night we would go to this cafe which was closed for the night, and all the food that was left over from the restaurant from that day, they would feed us, the crew, so that was our catering. Got our clothes on, went on to set, and we just basically started shooting. And Mark and I would try and lead the camera from a single shot into a 2-shot as much as we could. We did as little on-set rehearsals as possible. We kind of talked about how we'd like to shoot it. Basically, when we got on set, we just started shooting and kept shooting the scene until it fell apart, and we had to come back and do reverse angles. So we managed to shoot a feature film in 30 hours. So we shot an 85-minute film in 30 hours.
Incredible.
On a phone with about $10,000 in the bank. So it's quite an achievement, and it's actually the most enjoyable experience I've had being an actor, because it was just me and Mark, and he carries the film, and he's in a few other scenes with other people, but 34 minutes in, it becomes a film just between these 2 characters, and they went to college together. And then this thing happens on this particular night where I turn up wanting something of mine he has. And I won't give it away because people might want to watch it, but it's kind of a crime genre thriller. We're very lucky that Steph was able to bring real police onto the set, so we had real police, working police people being themselves, being working police. A guy called Dan Hanna, who works for Peter Jackson, gave us a motorbike and some guns and various squibs and props and blood packs. The sound guy had worked for Quentin Tarantino, and he just happened to have brought a lodge down in Mapua, down there in Motueka. And so he still had all his own sound gear, and he was able to come and do a really professional job of the sound. And yeah, we were just really lucky. It all just kind of came together.
If you want to take a look at the film, I'll leave links in the description, and you can take a look. So yeah, it really proves that you don't need really expensive equipment to, like, you can make a feature film like that with 84 minutes or something just on an iPhone. Well, maybe with a gimbal, but it's not incredible.
the great thing about the lens is it turns it into widescreen 4K, so it kind of makes it into that film format that you can show on the big screen. I do have to say, it works really well in good light. If you don't have good light and it gets a bit too dark, then it does pixelate. There's one scene in the film where we go into darkness and it pixelates a bit. Well, we quite like that effect, but you do have to be. We're very lucky that we shot it in one location. You know, it's really good if you can kind of contain the space that you're shooting in. But as you know, we had one that we hid another camera, another phone in amongst some chippy packets, so we could actually shoot that with the shotgun and not actually put anyone in danger. So from that point of view, it was very useful.
That is great. So basically, like, if you're out there and you're listening to this and you want to start filmmaking, but you think, oh, I don't have all this expensive equipment, this just sort of proves that you can, with this in your pocket. I know you can't see, I haven't actually got the camera on for the podcast, but I'm holding up my phone, and with this you can it's so much more powerful than even cameras like 10 years ago. Just to have that in your pocket 2019 is like the best time in history to be able to discover your passion as a filmmaker, because you're even a photographer, or this opens up so many doors. That's just what I think.
Yeah. Right.
So Jed, how did you discover your passion for acting?
I grew up on a sheep farm in central North Island, so we had 7,000 sheep, 500 cows, about 20 odd horses. I was always going to be a farmer, and then I went away to boarding school in Palmerston North. Got sent away there, my brother and I. And I got a detention for doing something bad in class and had to do a drama course. Drama was a detention, as if you can imagine. And I do remember we did a John Lennon play called Over the Wall, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. And then later on that year, the drama teacher who I'd been on detention with offered me a part in a play by Bertolt Brecht called The Resistible Rise of Arturo Ui. I got to play a gangster called Emmanuel Jury, who got to wear these hats of the people that he'd kind of done away with. And so that was kind of my first experience of doing anything, basically drama, and it was a lot of fun. I then when I finished school, I worked on the farm for a year, and then I went down to university to become a kinesiologist or a phys ed teacher. That was going to be what I was going to do. And in my third year, we were able to do what they call electives, and one of the electives was drama. And I'd been doing one of the parts of the course in phys ed is dance, and my dance teacher said if you did a bit of drama, you'd actually be a much better dancer. So I thought, oh, well, I'll give it a crack. And I was told that if you were a guy and you did that drama course, you'd probably get an A because there weren't many guys doing it. I've never had an A for anything, so I thought it'd be kind of cool. So I started, a woman called Lisa Warrington did that 1 year course, and I started doing what they call lunchtime theatre. So we'd do one act plays and the students would come and watch it. And one day, an actress who is now Nicole Kidman's dialect coach, a woman called Miranda Harcourt, whose daughter is getting a lot of acclaim for films such as Leave No Trace. She was kind of a lot of buzz around her in the award nominations this year. She said, you should go to drama school because you could teach drama. If you've really got something, you should go to the National Drama School. And I thought, well, maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea. I could teach drama and phys ed. So I applied and I was successful. I got an audition and I went along and managed to score a part and did 2 years of training, and then, started doing some plays, doing some theatre plays. One of our plays that we did that year was written by Joan Plowright. It was called Oh, What a Lovely War, about World War I, and people stood up and clapped. They stood up and gave us a standing ovation, and that changed everything. That was a moment where I thought, you can tell stories that actually move people from A to B, and it has an effect on people, and I quite like that idea. I did theatre for 2 or 3 years, and I was doing a show called Caramel Cream, written by a guy called Stephen Sinclair, who happens to be a co-writer of Peter Jackson's. And 2 years earlier, Peter had tried to get a film called Brain Dead up off the ground, and it had kind of fallen over, and he'd made a film called Meet the Feebles in the meantime. Peter came backstage and offered me a part in this revamped version of Brain Dead set in the 1990s, and I didn't know who he was. I knew he'd made films, but I didn't know that particular person talking to me was Peter Jackson. And I turned him down, and then when he left, Stephen Sinclair said, do you know who that was? That was Peter Jackson. I was like, oh, you should have told me. Anyway, I rang up the next day, rang my agent, and sure enough, I got the part, playing this hardcore zombie called Void. And doing that film, I'd done another film called Chunuk Bair just before that, about World War I soldiers in Gallipoli. I didn't really know what I was doing. Doing Peter's film, I learned a lot about how to use the camera, about somebody's passion for filmmaking, about how an actor, you have to have a broad base, because Pete expected his actors to do a lot of their own stunt work, so you had to be quite physically fit. But just watching the way that the crew worked around him, I thought, yeah, this is something I really want to do. This is the kind of life I want to do. I want to tell stories like this. And I've been very lucky that with TV and theatre and with film, I've managed to kind of do all three and make a living from it. Did a play called Skin Tight, a two-hander, which we toured around New Zealand for 5 years, and went to Edinburgh in 1998. Won a Fringe first, got a season in London, had people like Peter O'Toole come and see the show, and some of the Redgraves and really cool theatre people in the UK came and saw that show, and again, they really liked it. And while I was there, got an email from Richard Taylor. Just before I'd left, we had done a radio play of 2 scripts of Lord of the Rings. So myself and Craig Parker and the guy called Cameron Rhodes and various other Wellington actors played all the parts. And what they did was they got Christian Rivers, who's just directed Mortal Engines, to draw a whole lot of animatrix, like moving cartoons. And along with these radio plays, they took that to Hollywood to try and get the money to make the Lord of the Rings films. And of course, everyone knows they got money from New Line Cinema to make them into 3. I didn't think they'd get the money. I have to be honest. I was like, there's no way that they will get the money to make those films. I'd read the books, and I actually, in my heart of hearts, I did not believe that it was possible. I thought if anyone could do it, it would be Peter, but I didn't think that would be possible. And yeah, so I got this email from Richard Taylor saying, you need to get back to New Zealand. Got the green light to make Lord of the Rings, and I know that Peter wants you to be a part of it. So I literally jumped on the next plane and came home. Got to work on those films and have sort of been working on big films ever since. And then I get to do something like Blue Moon, which is completely back to where I kind of started with. Very little money, quite a small crew, got one really good idea and some a lot of luck. So that's a shortened version of what I told you the last time we talked.
With going from big films to doing Blue Moon and things like that, do you prefer the huge like creative control you have when you're doing lower budget films with less crew, and to doing the larger feature films?
Like they're kind of the same beast, but they're different. With a big film, with a studio film, you're a small part of a big puzzle. And there are days when it feels like that. I do remember on the set of The Hobbit, and I hope Martin Freeman doesn't mind me saying this, where he said, wow, I now know what a featured extra is. Because we kind of felt like the camera was more important on that particular day, where all of us were just walking through Mirkwood. We weren't really doing any acting. We were just kind of walking in our costumes. And that tends to happen on a big film, where sometimes you feel like you get a bit lost. Having said that, there's nothing cooler than being in something that has that broad fan base, because there's so much genuine goodwill from the fans. It can't help but make you feel good about what you do. But you're right, you do have a lot more creative control, especially in terms of the way that you want to develop your character. It's very hard on a big film where you've got a studio sort of defining the look of things. You've got a director that's got an overview, but he's also very conscious of the fact that the studio has their own opinions. There's a lot of A-listers, so there's a lot of ego. And it's very tricky to try and find your place within the hierarchy of when you can ask the question, when you can push for more lines, for instance, where you can make decisions about where your character goes. Something like Blue Moon, which is a really kind of small and insular thing, it comes down to the performance. That's what sells the film. The performance comes very, very, very important. And so you put a lot more into it, and you get, like we did 11-minute takes. You never get to do that on a big film. You just don't have things fall apart when you've got 3 cameras working on 3D. And so it becomes a lot more shooting out of context, shooting out of order, shooting little bits. On a big film like that, you'd shoot 2 minutes a day. On a big film like Lord of the Rings, you'd shoot 2 minutes of completed footage or usable footage a day. You might spend $400,000 doing that. On our film, we managed to shoot, 85 minutes. We managed to shoot 20 minutes of usable footage a day. So that's the difference. Yeah. You just don't have the clutter. On a big film, you have 9 people dressing all the dwarves. You have 20 to 30 camera people with all those cameras. You've got all the lighting people, and so everything slows down. If each one of those people takes 30 seconds longer than normal, you're adding a lot of hours to your day. Whereas because we had the costumes, once we had the radio mics on, and once the camera was set up, we were into it. So you kind of get through a lot more work, and it's more satisfying in that respect. There's also a lot less noise on a small set, so you can lock it down and you can be a lot quieter, and then you can be just one-on-one with the other person you're working with. The trick is on a big film is to forget all of that artifice, is to be able to ignore what's happening around you and not get flustered by the clutter. I have been on big films where young actors straight out of drama school have completely freaked out. They've got there and there's 400 people just waiting for them to be amazing. And that can be very confronting. So I'm very, very glad that on the films that I worked with early on, they weren't huge crews, they weren't a huge cast. I was able to kind of cut my teeth and work out how to maintain my own equilibrium, learn the technical aspects, but also do my job.
So yeah, going on how younger actors come out of drama school and film school, and they feel overwhelmed by.
Yeah.
Do you think drama school prepares you enough for the industry, or do you think your time at drama school was worthwhile?
Yeah, I'll answer that first. I'll say for me, I'd done 4 years at university, so I found drama school quite difficult because I'd already done 4 years of higher education. So I was a bit kind of, one of the things it did for me was I was immune to being told off. Tutors would tell me off and I'd go, oh yeah. If I was straight out of school going into that, I would have found that like, oh no, I've messed up and the tutors are angry with me. Because I'd done 4 years at university, I'd been told off a lot. I was like, yeah, whatever. That's quite a good thing as an actor. You've got to also hold your own ego in check, but you also have to have enough confidence in yourself to be able to perform. So one of the things that drama school does do for you is you get to work every day with other actors. So that's that's a good thing. But the thing it doesn't do is it doesn't necessarily give you the idea of what it's going to be like in the real world. One of the things they didn't do when I was there was give me any kind of business acumen, how to do my tax, any of those important things, how to do a contract, all of that stuff. It's important you get an agent for that stuff. So I didn't really have a clue. And it doesn't prepare you for how full on it is out there in terms of you are competing with a whole lot of, at drama school you're competing with 12 other people to get those roles for your graduation show. In the real world, you're competing in some places with hundreds of thousands of other actors. And nothing can prepare you for handling rejection. That's the hardest part of our business is you might do 10 auditions in a month, say, and you might not get any of those jobs. Sometimes you might do 4 auditions and get them all. And a lot of that stuff is out of your control as an actor. You might not look what the producer thought or the director thought. You might not be right for the balance of the family unit they're putting together. You might not be available for the whole shoot. You might be slightly older than they thought. So there's a lot of that stuff that you don't get taught at drama school that kind of happens in the real world. Having said that, you do get to learn a lot of different techniques for building a character, and some of that is really useful. Some of it's not. I've worked with actors that have never gone to drama school that are some of the best I've ever worked with. Their instincts for what feels right in a scene are just as good as anyone with 3 years training. So I think it comes down to the individual. My advice for young people is if you want to start doing stuff, find people that you like, that you can write stories with, who kind of get what you're trying to say with your film, and just start shooting, because you learn as much doing that as you do doing any kind of training. And in fact, we didn't do any film training at school, at drama school. It was all theatre. So I learned how to be a film actor by working with older, experienced people who gave me advice. So that has changed. There's a lot more emphasis on film acting and directing in drama schools than there used to be.
Do you prefer acting in theatre, or do you prefer acting in films?
It's a pretty simple equation. I like the money you get in films because there's not a lot of money in theatre. I love that live experience in theatre that you get. There's something that happens between the actor and the audience that you can't get in film, because when you watch it in the cinema, they're watching a 2-dimensional, sometimes a 3-dimensional, but mainly a 2-dimensional piece of art that you can kind of be slightly separated from. Whereas in theatre, you can't get away from the fact that there's someone right in front of you having the experience. And some of that emotional stuff that touches people is very difficult to achieve in film. In theatre, there's an emotional commitment that an audience has sitting in front, having that stuff done in front of them. And if you mess up, you can't say, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go for take 2 of that. We're just going to rewind and go back to that point and go again. So there's a lot more you have to save yourself a lot more in theatre. If you get yourself into trouble, like if you're doing Shakespeare and you suddenly jump 4 pages, it's very hard to improvise an iambic pentameter, for instance. So you have to save yourself a lot more. And also, if you're doing a long run, say 12 weeks of a play, you have to manufacture freshness for that story every night, but still be consistent up to a point. So it's a very different beast in that point of view. It's like on film, you're doing a 12-week season, so you might do 12 takes of that scene in one day, but in theatre that's going to take you 12 weeks to get that scene through. So yeah, I mean, I would love for theatre to be as financially supported as film is, because I think a lot more people would do a bit more theatre. I still love doing theatre. I still love that idea of doing 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks rehearsal with a company and working out organically with you and the director how this is going to be. I think that's kind of a bit of magic. Because like I say, there's so many things that you don't have any control of on a film set. You've got so much less control about your performance in some ways. And you have to be quite a strong personality to go, no, I've got this idea for this character, I want to hang on to that. Because you've got the DOP going, well, we don't really want to push in there, we only want to do a close-up for this bit, and you're determined that you want the close-up for the whole thing, because that's the money shot, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to, there's a lot more kind of negotiation in terms of that on a film set than there is in theatre. So yeah, there's no real answer there, because I love them both. And the one thing that I haven't done a lot of here in New Zealand is television, because we do a lot of fast turnaround television, and I'm not very good at it. I take a wee longer to develop a character than some people. So yeah, we all have our strengths and weaknesses.
So, to finish off, sort of, if there's any young people, maybe late teens or early 20s, who want to get into acting, do you reckon they should build up a portfolio, or what sort of steps do you think they should take to, if they're very serious about it?
Well, have a look around at what's on offer in educational assistance for a start, because there are some courses that get offered at universities and colleges that you can just walk into that are not part of the course, and you don't necessarily have to be a student there. Have a look in your town and see if there's an active amateur drama society, for instance, a recreation society. Go online in your area and see if they're looking for extras for films, because you can learn an awful lot by being an extra on a film. One of the things that will teach you is if this is an industry you want to be in. And sometimes people get noticed being extras. They look good and then they get given a line and it turns out they can do it, and then you can kind of build a portfolio on that. So that's a good way in. Get together with your mates and do some writing. Find things that are happening in your lives that are important to you, that have affected you, and try and get them down on paper, and then just have a crack at shooting them. Because you might find that some of your friends are good actors, and you might find that some of your friends are really good directors, and then you can actually start to collaborate and work together. And that happens a lot more here in New Zealand, where actors especially are getting together with friends of theirs that they know are writers and actually making a film from the beginning, saying, this is the story we want to do, these are the people we want to work with, and this is the director we want to work with, and actually putting it together and then getting the finance after you've kind of done a few of the nuts and bolts. So yeah, I mean, there isn't really one clear path to do it. It's just, if you're passionate about it and it's something you want to do, don't wait by the phone. Don't wait for an agent to call you, or don't wait for someone to give you the right. I would just say get out there and do it. Because like you were just saying, this piece of technology, this thing here, is as good a camera as you get, like you say, 10 years ago. Much better than VHS, much better than Beta. And it's really, really easy to do. And if you have it on you all the time, I've seen short films made by people just pulling their phone out on a day and then just doing a little narrative, shooting some stuff, and then cutting it together later. And, all of that stuff is filmmaking. It doesn't have to be Lord of the Rings. It could be Lord of the Phone. It's as simple as that. But don't wait. It's that thing of don't waste any time. If that's what you want to do, get out there and do it, because, failure is part of the thing. I mean, some of the best filmmakers have learnt their best advice to people is to get out there and fall over, because you actually learn a lot by doing that as well. And you certainly do as an actor. I've seen stuff up on screen that I go, oh no, people can watch that forever. Why did I do that? And that's not a bad thing. You just the next time you get in that situation, you just go, no, I actually want to do one that I'm happy with. I know I could have been better in that scene. I know we were running out of time, but can we just do one that I'm really happy with? You know, every actor in the world will tell you there's a scene somewhere in a film that they're in that they're not happy about. But that's part of the process. So yeah, if you're a young person and you want to do it, man, get out there and do it, and don't wait for someone to give you the excuse.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Jed. I really appreciate it. Again, if you want to check out Blue Moon, links in the description. I'll also link your socials, Twitter maybe. Whatever you want, you can just let me know after we finish recording. Just letting you guys know, the New Vision website is now live at www.nwvsn.co.uk. That will also be linked in the description if you want to pick up a t-shirt or a hoodie or a sweater. We've put a few designs on the website just to sort of test and see if people would like to pick anything up, and yeah, so thank you for coming on, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, and just if you have any parts for slightly aging New Zealand actors, you know, and then travel to just let me know. If you've got any friends out there that've got any good film scripts, do send them our way. We're always looking for good stories.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.